right, Briterion Bollection is back, bitches. We're here with we're here with another episode of Briterion Bollection film podcast. I'm your host Kevin. I'm here with my boy Chris, who's fighting his cat right now.
Yes.
Cats are a big part of this podcast, by the way. They're always taking, yeah, they're always stealing the show on here. But anyways, we're back with another Women's History Month film. In the previous episode that I did with my wife, I kind of mentioned how that I'm really sticking with this Women's History Month theme. Much to the chagrin of maybe a lot of people, but I was trying to say, like, if I don't do this now, I may never do another female directed movie the rest of the year. You know what I'm saying? It's like I'm cramming these in now.
How dare you, sir? How dare you? How dare you say that? All these thousands and millions of YouTubers and Instagrammers listening right now.
I'm just saying, like, I mean, of course I will. I'm just saying, like, if I don't, but I could go unconscious. I could go on autopilot and just choose, a million Jean-Claude Van Damme movies, and, with no female directors. And, so if anything, it, like, forces me to be inclusive. But, there are great films directed by females.
You could spend a whole month on Quentin Tarantino.
Yeah, exactly.
Guillermo del Toro.
Exactly.
Maybe Scorsese, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Not a big Scorsese guy, too mainstream. But
yeah, kind of. I feel like he's already been tackled a million times, literally. Yes. But I kind of like to go off the beaten path. But we'll see. We'll see what we do. I know. We got to do some Stephen King for your ass, right?
Got some kind of movie that does liberties and does justice to the writing that he does. There aren't very many movies that did that. They all kind of butchered his work.
But we have some lined up. Maybe we could do a Stephen King month, and we'll just do all King all the time. But anyways, so the movie we're gonna go with tonight, I would say it's actually the first movie of my Beatles trilogy, quote unquote. At least it's a trilogy for now. Maybe it might be bigger. Maybe it might be a quadrilogy, or it might be more than that. Because I do plan on doing 2 other Beatles related movies this month. In the last few days of this month, I plan on doing this one plus 2 other Beatles related movies. Let's see if you can guess what those are out there, you listeners. So the woman who directed the film that we're going to talk about today, her name is Sam Taylor Wood. She's a British chick, and she directed a film about one of the most famous British people of all time. And that man is John Lennon. So she directed a film called Nowhere Boy, which we're going to talk about today. Thanks for agreeing to do this, Chris. I know you just saw it, hadn't seen it before. What did you think of it? Just initial impression of it.
It's very well done. It was heart-wrenching. Kind of shows how the influences in his life and who made him who he is today sort of got him into this whole business of rock superstardom.
Right, exactly. I'm glad you liked it. Because you could have been like, it was shite,
but, I like that. I like shite. I think I start using that all the time. This is shite.
Yeah, we need to bring that stateside. Yeah. So anyways, I actually saw this movie in the theater, believe it or not. So I saw it when it came out. I guess I saw it in 2010 because I think it came out in the UK in 2009, late 2009, like almost on my birthday, 2009, and then it must have come out in the US like a few months after that. So yeah, I saw it in the theater, and there was like 2 other people there in the whole theater.
It's playing in one theater in San Diego, probably, and you had to drive 20 miles to go see it.
No, I think it was playing at like an AMC but it wasn't getting many fans. Or maybe you could be right. It might have been at a Landmark, and I just forgot. But yeah, I saw it alone during the day or something like that.
I wouldn't make that publicly known, but good for you.
Well, I kind of wanted to get it out of the way and not have all
One
these
of your dentist
a-holes.
appointments, right? Dentist appointments.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly.
yes.
Um, anyways, so yeah, I saw it in the theater, and I really liked it. And so because I'm a huge Beatles fan, I was hoping that not only would the movie be good, but like the accuracy of the story had to be there. You know what I'm saying? Because like I could recite you the Beatles' origins and their career like the back of my ass. You know what I'm saying? Like I could, like to me, it's like a biblical story to me. Like it's like some people can tell you Exodus. I can tell you, John and Paul and George Ringo. I could tell you that off
Without the
top.
use of a mirror. Without the use of a mirror.
Yeah, exactly. Without the use of a mirror, just turn my head a little bit. Just Mr. Fantastic. It. Anyways, you're getting too hung up on this ass thing.
You brought in the ass.
um,
I'm just
nice.
saying, you know your Beatles stuff. You know your Beatles stuff
Yeah,
inside out. I don't know about the back of your ass. I can't speak for that. But I can authorize and verify that Kevin is a knows everything about the Beatles, and I can always ask him questions about the Beatles, and he can say that's bullshit, and I'll say yeah, okay, I thought it might be, but I just want to check with you if they were like butchering babies and drinking their blood. But I just so yeah, that turned
yeah,
out not to be true. So
yeah, yeah. Exactly. I'm your Beatles tech specialist. Like you just call the hotline and I answer Beatles questions for you. Yeah, basically, yeah. And I should start charging that as a service or something like that.
900 Beatles. I don't know what you put there.
Beatles. Anyways,
Yes,
um,
all
that's a
night
whole
long. We're
that's a whole
waiting
different
for you.
that's a whole different hotline. Remember those like remember you would see like cable or whatever late at night and there were these like hotlines that you could call. Do you remember seeing that?
Oh yeah, yeah.
And but it was like porn but not really or something. I don't know what it was. There was something like in the early 2000s where it was like, you want a job? Like call this hotline, but it was like all these like scantily clad women in the commercial. It
Good
was
advertising.
yeah. It was an interesting time.
I doubt you talk to those people on the phone, but hey,
So, anyways, I know the Beatles very well. You could vouch for that. So, I was hoping that the movie would be good and that they would get the story right. And I feel like they really did. I feel like the movie is pretty good and it's pretty accurate, based on what I've read. I have the DVD of like the Beatles anthology, so I know all that shit. And they have it pretty accurate. So the movie starts out and we hear a zing, we hear like the opening chord of like A Hard Day's Night. That's like the opening chord of the song A Hard Day's Night, and in the movie The Hard Day's Night, which is a great film. We can talk about it sometime. Maybe not you, but me and someone else. Um, Hard Day's Night. So in the beginning of that movie, you hear "Zing, it's been a hard day's night," and they're running from girls in the movie, and then so this kind of echoes that, even though it's like a prequel, I guess. Like you hear the "Zing," and he's running, and he's like giddy, and he's just by himself. There's no one, no girls chasing him, but he's just running around the school like an idiot or whatever, running around town. So it's a nice little callback to A Hard Day's Night. And then you see him riding his bike with his friend, with his blonde friend, Pete, I guess is his name. Uh, we can see that he's a young ruffian. He's a born hooligan. This guy likes to fuck around. They play "Wild One." I'm a Wild One on the soundtrack. And we see his aunt is Kristen Scott Thomas, who I always thought she was attractive. She's she's was in The English Patient that you might remember. And then he runs into this girl, this schoolmate of his, Marie. And he sees her and he's like, "Hey, angel face, show us your jugs." And she's like, "Fuck off, Lennon. Or show your cock." And then I guess he pulls it out. She likes what she sees. She smiles and she walks away. And yeah, I like that girl. That girl, she was in the movie Man Up with Simon Pegg, which is a really funny movie. And she's like on some show too. But she's cool. I'm sure you're writing that down now, Chris.
How do you spell that?
And then, and I know when we were watching it earlier, you were like, "So did he go to a private school or something like that?" And I was like, "Well, all the schools look like that." You were just saying that because of what he was wearing, right? And like he was talking to the headmaster or something. But I was like, all their schools kind of look like that over there. And then you said, "Oh, so they actually give a crap about education over there." And I was like, "Yeah, not like here where we have Vince McMahon running the Department of Education."
God, pray for us all, everyone.
Yeah. Soon you're gonna have to. The kids are gonna have to fight their teachers in a steel cage match, ladder match with the principal.
To the principal's office.
DX. That's cool. Yeah. So yeah, they do care about their education there. And he listens to the radio with his uncle, and it's like the Goon Show. I guess that was big at the time because I guess like Peter Sellers was part of that. So I know the Beatles really like that. Um, and you were saying you thought the guy looked like a guy from Monty Python, but he's not. But to me, he looked like almost some vampire guy. Like he was in those Hammer movies or something like that. I thought he was from that, but no, he's actually. I think he's the guy from Hot Fuzz. Actually, he's the guy who does. He's like an actor, and he does like a Romeo and Juliet play, based on the movie, on the Leonardo DiCaprio movie, not the
Okay.
Shakespeare story. It's hilarious. You gotta
That's an
see
awesome
that.
soundtrack. But
Yeah, yeah. People love that movie, but
like Bachman or whatever his name is,
yeah,
Boris Bachman, whatever.
Baz Luhrmann. Yeah,
Baz Luhrmann. Yes, that's what I said.
yeah. He said Tal Bachman. She's so high. You like him? Yeah, he's a good singer.
Hey, you know.
Yeah. Oh, and this is the second straight episode with you and me that we talk about Hot Fuzz. So I think that's a sign that we need to do that sometime. So his uncle gives him a harmonica as like a little present. He's like, "Oh, I found this. Here you go." And then his uncle like collapses or whatever. And we were like, "What the hell?" And then we see him like being taken to the hospital. He's going into the ambulance, and then we find out that he passes. You know, um, so he tries to go home and like cry with his aunt, but she's like, "Get the hell off me!" She's like,
Yeah, she's not gonna take a hug. That's so cold.
"Yeah,
He's lost his uncle, and he's just sneaking up to give her a nice warm hug, and she's like, "Get the fuck away!" Not in those
yeah,
exact words, but in a more cold and
yeah."
personal way.
She's
Yeah,
like, "We British, bruh. We don't do that." But yeah, we can see their relationship is a little frosty at first. And so they're at the funeral, and he kind of looks over and he sees this like kind of hot redhead lady, and he's like, "Oh, who's that?" or whatever. And then he talks to his cousin there, and he's like, "Oh, did you see her, the redhead? Like, that's my mom, isn't she?" And he's like, "Yeah, I guess so." And he's like, "I want to see her. Like I want to go to her." And so like they devise a plan to try to see her, and they tell his aunt that they're going to go to Blackpool for a little trip, a little field trip or whatever. But they really want to go see his mom, and so they start like walking, and he's like, "Okay, are we gonna take the bus?" And he's like, "Oh, like no need to," or whatever. He like takes like 10 steps and goes to the right, and she lives right there. Or like, he's like, "Oh shit! Like she's lived here this whole fucking time. She's lived like right around the corner or whatever. You guys been keeping this for me the whole damn time." Um, so we see he knocks on the door, and it is that redhead lady, the mom, and I forgot what her name was, but she was in the original Shameless, the British version, that actress, and she's happy to see him. She's like, "Oh my god," and she hugs him, and she's like really in love with him. and we can see that she has other daughters, and she's really like extroverted, and he's not like that at all yet. Anyways,
Yeah.
um,
No way.
and she sees that he has a harmonica, and she's like, "Oh, let me see that." She's like, "Oh, a blowy or whatever," which is what you used to call something else, right?
Mouthy. It was a mouthy, I think.
A mouthy,
I'm here for the corrections.
which is what you used to call something else, right? No.
I love me and my mouthies.
Yes, we do. So, anyways, yeah, she kind of blows into a little bit,
Is it Kristen Scott Thomas? Is that who it was?
That's his aunt.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that's his aunt. Um, yeah.
Ophelia Love Bond? No.
Uh, uh, what's her name?
Ophelia Lovey Bond? Marie Kennedy. No,
Oh, I
that's
think. Oh, Anne Marie Duff. That's her name. Anne Marie Duff.
wow. She didn't
Yeah.
age very well.
It's been a while. So yeah, she sees his harmonica, and she sees the brand, and she's like, "Hona," like, and she's like, "Boo, down the Krauts," which you took offense to, right?
Yeah, I was very offended by that comment.
That was
Yes,
highly racist, right?
Germans across the world were very upset about that.
There were demonstrations around the world because of that.
That's why the showing in Germany wasn't so good.
Yeah, not a very good box office there due to this line. So then they kind of hang out. They go to the boardwalk, which I've been lucky. I actually visited Liverpool, so I've hung out around there. It's pretty cool. Just being in the land of Beatles, it's like being in Israel where Jesus walked. To me, this is like being where Paul McCartney walked. You know what I'm saying? This is like holy ground to me. So just feeling their vibes there, it was awesome. I really loved it. I would love to go back. Um, and they go kind of in this fun house, and they're looking in the mirrors, and it's like I like that scene. It's like cool little editing, like the kind of fast paced editing. I like that. Not enough movies do that. Like they don't play with the editing enough. I like that. Um, and they find a cafe, like they're walking, and she's like, "You hear that?" And she's like all excited, and he's like, "What?" or whatever. And he's like, "Follow." She's like, "Follow me," or whatever. And they go in, and you could hear she's like so turned on by the sound of rock and roll music, and she starts dancing and singing. So she starts singing Rocket 88, and so that song's by Ike Turner, and that's considered like the first rock song, I guess, like the first rock and roll song that was recorded. Some people say it's that song. So she goes and she dances, she smokes in the cafe, and she tells him, she asks him, like, "You know what it means, rock and roll?" And he's like, clueless. And she's like, "Sex." And he's like, "Okay."
He's still clueless after that.
Yeah.
What's
He's like,
sex?
"Thanks, Mom." Thanks for pointing that out. So they go home, and her husband comes home, who's played by David Morrissey. I guess his name is Bobby in the movie, and he's like pissed. He's like pissed off to see John there, and he tells him, "Oh, the girls should be in bed," and he's like, "Go off to bed," or whatever. And his cousin's like, "Yeah, we should go. It's getting late," or whatever. So um, they leave, and his mom is like, "Oh, like." She tells him to come back, and it's like it's weird. Like she's like kind of flirtatious with him or whatever. Like yeah, you see
Like,
it
where's
kind of
this going exactly?
yeah. Which I don't know if that was necessarily true to life, even though I kind of like seeing it in the movie. Like at least it gives it like a twisted thing that I think makes the movie interesting. You know what I'm saying? Like this kind of Freudian sort of thing. I think that's really interesting for the movie. Um, I don't know if that happened in real life though. But anyways, hopefully not.
I'd like to keep my image of him as clean as I can after you've destroyed it several times.
Yeah, exactly. So she tells him like she tells him to come back, and when he's like walking away, she like runs back out, and she's like, "I love you. You're my dream. Remember that." um, and he comes back home, and his aunt is just reading. She has no idea what he's been doing. And then we see like a little flashback of John like as a little boy, and it's like just a surreal dream that he has or something. And then we see him drawing, and he's like saying gibberish to himself, and that's what he would really do. He would really like mumble gibberish, and he would do those doodles. Like he would doodle a lot, and you could see that if you Google it or whatever, Google John Lennon drawings or whatever, you can find all that stuff, and it's exactly the same. So
That's
they got that right for sure. And so they go, and he hangs out with her again, his mom, and he takes him to see an Elvis movie. It was like footage of Elvis at the theater, and he's like singing, and all the girls are screaming, like in the movie and in the theater. All the girls are screaming, like his mom was like screaming, and she's like turned on to see Elvis or whatever, and John sees that. He's like, oh shit. He's like, this is really like reacting. He's like, I need to do that. He's like, I need to copy that. And I remember, I think when he was interviewed later on, yeah, I think he was interviewed on like the Michael Douglas show. Not Michael Douglas, one of these. Not Michael Douglas, the actor. This other guy, Michael Douglas. He's like, oh, what made you want to go into rock and do rock music? And he was like, well, you saw Elvis wiggling his ass and the girls were screaming, so he's like, that's a good job. I remember him saying that. You can probably find that on YouTube. So then like he starts kind of slowly changing his style. He starts like quaffing the hair a bit more, a little more like rock jackets. Yeah, he starts
whatever
rocking the pompadour.
they put in there.
Pompadour with mad gel, right? That's what he starts doing. Um, And then he's with his friend, the blonde dude, and he steals some records and runs out. And he looks at them all. He's like, oh, they're all jazz. Jazz is shit, or whatever. And he's like throwing them out. And some guy comes up to him. He's like, hey, a little respect, or whatever. And he's like, jazz, though. And he's like, jazz is cool. And he's like, no, jazz is shit. And he's like, tell Billie Holiday that. And he's like, sure, where is he? It's a nice little piece of humor. They're like, like I said, he's a born ruffian. He's a young hooligan, and they get on top of a double-decker bus, like holding on the top, and they're like sharing a cigarette with each other. It's like pretty crazy.
Laying on the roof like flat, like is
Yeah,
that
exactly.
possible?
I mean, I didn't think so, but I'm like, oh shit, I guess so.
Did that ever happen? You're the expert.
I mean, I believe it. I think they did do that. Otherwise, I don't think they would have just thrown that into the movie
Okay,
for a 10-second shot. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm sure they did that for real. I know they would hang out on the buses a lot, for sure.
it was a cool moment sharing the cigarette with each
Yeah,
other, holding on
yeah,
for dear life.
yeah. It was badass.
Yeah.
So then they get off the bus, and he comes up to Marie, the angel face girl, and she's there with some dudes, and they kind of give him static and pull out some switchblades on him, and he's tough. He's like, hey, like, okay, like you guys look like apes and shit or whatever. Like, but then Marie intervenes and tells them to back off, and he walks away, and so like you see the guys with that style, they have like the pompadours and the suits like that. Um, those guys had that style, and the guy who saw them throwing the records also had that style. So that style was called like those guys were called Teddy Boys, and it's basically like these thugs, like these street hoodlum gangster wannabe guys, who like dressed nice or whatever. Like that's what they would call them, Teddy Boys. Um, and I even saw like a description of Clockwork Orange. I remember I forgot where I read it, but it was like, Alex is your classic Teddy boy, like getting into trouble at night, or like. So that was a thing. That's what they would call him, and even in the anthology, I remember Paul called John that. He said, like Paul said, oh, John was a Teddy boy underneath it all. Like he was kind of like he could be a bully, which we'll see kind of later in the film. And so he walks away. He walks back, and Marie is like behind him, and he tells her like, "Oh, your boyfriend's ugly" or whatever, and she's like, "He's not my boyfriend." he's my cousin, and he's like, oh, okay. Like he sees there's an opportunity there, I guess, you know. So the one record they salvaged from the ones they stole was like this Screamin' Jay Hawkins one or whatever, and he takes it to his mom, and she, you know, he's hanging out with her, and she puts it on, and then you hear, "I put a spell on you." You know, you hear that, boom, 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 which is a great song, and he's lying on the couch, and then she like lies with him. You know what I'm saying? She's like lying on top of him, and it's another strange Freudian moment there. You know,
Getting a little close there.
yeah, a little too close. But yeah, while she's doing that, while she's on top of him, he's like thinking, and then you're not sure if it's real or not, or if it's fantasy. But then it's on like Donkey Kong. He's with Marie Angel Face on the tree, and he's getting it on. Sex in the Park. um,
I was a little take. I was almost traumatized because I saw the hand in the underwear and the rubbing, and I thought, oh my God, it's his mom. They went too far. Thank God. Like then I saw Marie. I'm like, oh, good. Thank God.
yeah. I mean, maybe they wanted you to kind of think that. I don't know. The editing was a little too seamless there. I wish there was a little more. It was more obvious that he was with her. Um, but it's funny that they're doing that in the park, and years later, Paul would have a song on the White Album called "Why Don't We Do It in the Road." Um, I guess he should have did "Why Don't We Do It on a Tree." Yeah. So, and so you're not really sure if that's a fantasy, you know, or if it's, you know, it's something he wants to happen, or if it really happens. But then it like cuts, and we see that he's in the headmaster's office at the school, and I guess he got caught with a porno mag or something, you know. And that just reminded me of your mom took away your best porno mag. You gotta fight. Fight your right. But it's funny, you know, when you think about it, when you look through records, you're looking up Beatles records. Who do you find? Oh, Beastie Boys are right there. You know what I'm saying? It's funny how they both have that BEA, you know, and they're both, you know, seminal bands. Obviously, the Beatles are the biggest band, but it's kind of interesting, you know.
Boys are in
Yeah.
there too somewhere, but like on the other end.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
We don't talk about those
Um,
guys.
yeah, thanks for reminding me. So he gets into an argument with his aunt, and she's pissed off, and she throws an apple at his ass or whatever, which is kind of funny because they end up calling their company Apple, you know, which is funny because Ringo means apple in Japanese, you know, which was what Yoko was like. Oh, Ringo means apple in Japanese. She would tell John that later on. And then what's funny is, so they had Apple Records. That was their company that the Beatles started. But then when Steve Jobs and shit was doing, you know, Macintosh, he's like, oh, we're gonna call it Apple, like as a tribute to the Beatles. But then the Beatles, you know, found out about that, and they're like, whoa, 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 like you can't just take this, like our shit's called Apple, you know. And then they're like, okay, well, we'll make an agreement that we'll never go into the music industry. And so the Beatles were like,
Oh,
okay. Which, I mean, eventually the iPod came out, so I'm sure to get permission for that, Jobs had to write a big ass check to McCartney and company, you know. So I think that's partly why McCartney's a billionaire, is because of that. You know what I'm saying? It's not his songs, because all his songs were under Michael Jackson for a long ass time. You know what I'm saying? So, or a majority of them, you know. So I think it really came from Steve Jobs' ass stealing the name, you know. Um, so it's kind of a little interesting sidebar. So yeah, she throws an apple at him, and then right at that moment, there's a knock at the door, and it's like this guy who saw their ad for a tenant in the newspaper or whatever, and she's like, okay, like, all right, like I'll let your ass stay or whatever. You know, it's like it's kind of a weird, you know, subplot. Doesn't really do much, but you know, I guess just to give his aunt some action, you know, maybe literally, I don't know.
she wasn't gonna
So
let his ass in until she found out he was a biochemist, and she's like, "Oh, biochemist, come right in. Let me get you something to eat." Yes,
Yeah, yeah, I know.
their
All of a
eyes got
sudden,
all
that
big.
yeah. She's like,
Ka-ching!
"What are you studying?" Because he's like, "I'm a student." She's like, "What kind of student?" And then she's like, "Ooh, this guy's gonna make bank someday."
You know,
Yeah. So then he leaves and he goes to his mom's house and he's knocking on the door. And then we see that she's inside, but she doesn't want to answer. She's like disheveled and smoking. And I kind of like how the light hits her right there. It's pretty good cinematography. And, and he's like, what the fuck? Like, now he's like, now I see why my aunt, Kristen Scott Thomas, fucking hates you. You know what I'm saying? Because you do shit like this, So that's like his first realization that she can be like flaky and stuff. You know what I mean? Um,
perhaps
so
manic
he goes
depressive.
off. Oh, what was that?
Was she manic depressive? I kind of got that.
I mean, yeah, I think so. I mean, I guess she was. I might have forgotten that, in my research over time. But yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, we see because she's like depressed and smoking, and she has, a lot of mood swings, I guess you could say. So he goes off and he plays the mouth organ by himself, and he also plays harmonica too. I used to love when Craig Ferguson would say that on his show because he always had a harmonica. He's like, "Oh, you like to play the mouth organ?" He's like, "You like playing harmonica too?" Because I guess that's like a slang for harmonica, mouth organ, which is funny. I guess because it has the same sort of notes or whatever as a piano, so I guess that's why they call it that. I don't think it's the best slang name for something. um, so that science dude does end up staying with them, and we see John get a letter from the school. I guess that's like his suspension letter, and then we see him burn it. And he goes to his mom's house, and they're singing Elvis. And he says like, "Oh, why can't I be Elvis?" And she's like, "Because God was saving you for John Lennon or whatever." And it's funny that he would go on to be just as famous, or if not more famous than Elvis, and he wanted to be Elvis. It's like, both of them died young, really. These geniuses, they pass young, a lot of them. You know what I'm saying? Not all of them, but a lot of them do, sadly. So he tells his mom that he got suspended, and he asks if he can hang out with her, and she says, "Okay, but let's be productive." So she teaches him how to play banjo. So that's all true. Like, she taught him how to play. If it wasn't for his brief time reuniting with her for that time, you might not have the Beatles. You wouldn't have the Beatles. You wouldn't have John Lennon. She taught him how to play banjo first because she was an entertainer. Like, so that's like how she would make money. She would like go to the bar and she would like sing songs, and she was like a comedian too. So that's like her trade basically. So she taught him how to play banjo and then guitar. Um, and so it's funny. It's like she plays this Maggie May song, which the Beatles would end up recording on Let It Be. So they did a version on Let It Be, even though it's kind of a piss take, as they say. Like basically what that means is like they're fucking around. Like, they say, "Oh, I'm taking the piss," which means like I was just fucking around. But it's funny that they say taking the piss, but they don't say I'm taking the shit. Or, what I'm saying? Like, haven't heard that before.
Different.
But it's funny because he's like, "Who's Maggie May?" And she's like, "Oh." She just says that. Cut. Um, yeah. So if it wasn't,
Mom's a
yeah, if it
bit of a
was,
trollop too. Not
yeah,
she enjoys her times with men.
yeah. I mean, maybe she knew of her. She knew Maggie May personally. I don't know.
So Maggie must
Um,
be a real horror,
yeah, she's next level.
a horror.
Um, she's super scion. Um, so yeah, we see like a time lapse montage of him picking up the banjo, and he gets better with each like passing day. He's riffing all easily, and he's hiking up the sleeves, looking like Elvis, showing off the guns, while he's playing. So we see that he has the musical talent. after a brief period of time. And then his aunt gets a call that he's been suspended, and she didn't know about that, so she snoops around and she shows up at his mom's house, her sister's house, like while he's there. And she's like, "What the fuck?" Like, she orders him back home, but he won't go. He wants to just stay there, even though he doesn't say anything. And so his mom kicks her out of the house. She's like, "Get out of my house." And then the stepdad, David Morrissey, he smokes a shitload in this. He's every time you see him, he's smoking. Should have been nominated for best smoking in this. um, and John has like another nightmare again where he's little. He's a little kid, and then he wakes up and hears some arguing, and he like walks over and he like eavesdrops on his mom and stepdad arguing. He's telling him like, "Oh, John has to go. Like he has to go, like because he's like, we don't want to lose you again. That could be alluding to what you're saying about her. He's like, do it for the girls. We don't want to lose you." And so, I'm not sure what happened, but I'm sure she's done some gallivanting in the past. So after hearing this, the next morning, John tells him like, "Oh, I should go." And so he goes back to his aunt's, tail between his legs, um, and he tells her like, "I'm gonna start a rock and roll group, and be like Elvis." So his aunt's like, "Okay," and so she takes him to get a guitar. She takes him to the store, and they buy it for £7, which sounds hella cheap even for the time. It's like, how much would that be? Like $5 or $10 or whatever. Like, sounds very cheap for a full blown guitar. That guitar now, straight out of Guitar Center is like $200 or whatever. Sounded very cheap. And so yeah, he gets the guitar, and then we see him rocking the leather jacket. Now he's thinks he's Billy Badass, um, Johnny Badass, and he calls a meeting at school, smoking in the boys' room, and he's like, "Hey, like, we need to have a group meeting." And then the blonde kid was like, "Well, I figured we weren't here to take a communal crap."
Nice line.
Which sometimes you end up having to do that at work, don't you, Chris?
Not by choice. No, no. It should be one person in at a time, no matter what you're doing in there. But
But what's funny is that there's a urinal and then there's a stall right next to it. You're peeing, and then all of a sudden, some guy comes out of nowhere, like, "Yo, what's up, Chris?"
now
It's
it's
a
not the
very
talk.
disturbing predicament
Yes.
to be in. Anyways, I like that line, communal crap. So he tells his boys, he's like, "We're gonna form a band," and they're like, "We don't know how to play shit." And he's just like, "Doesn't matter. So John calls them the Quarrymen. So that's the first name that they chose for the band. Well, he really chose it. And he's like, "First practice will be in Pete's air raid shelter," which which is badass. I love that. I love that they can practice. They have an air raid shelter to practice in. Like, that's why rock sucks ass now. Is that we don't have, you know, war torn rock. You know what I'm saying? We're just getting all this like Gen Z, fucking privileged rock. You know what I'm saying? These guys were in shambles practicing in the air raid shelter. That's just badass, man. How could you not be the greatest group of all time with that shit? Uh, we need to get back to that, Chris.
Agreed.
Anyways, so we see them gearing up for the first performance. So yeah, so this whole thing is true. This is like accurate to a T, this whole section. In case you were wondering, Chris. So yeah, so it was at a church village fete. So it's basically like a rummage sale at a church, you know what I'm saying? And they're like, "Okay, this band wants to play, we'll let them play." And so they're playing, and then Paul was invited they have a mutual friend named Ivan. And he was like, "Oh, want to come to this village fete?" And he was like, "Okay, sure." And he's like, "There's a band playing. My friend's band's playing. You can check it out." And he's like, "Okay." So they're up there and they start playing Maggie May, the song about the horror that his mom taught him. And yeah, we see this kid uh, in the front watching them, and he has a white blazer on and a like a rose in the pocket. He looks like very classy for this village fete. And after the show, they're like drinking beers in the back of the church, and they think they're badasses. They're like, "Yeah, we just rocked the house." They're just drinking. They're like, "Yeah, we kicked ass," you know. And then that Ivan friend walks up to them, and the kid with the white blazer, he has a guitar on his back now too. And Ivan tells John's like, "Hey, John, this is my friend Paul. He plays too." And John's like, "What, with himself?" and and Paul's like, "Whoa, like that came out of nowhere." And so they shake hands, and he's like, "I'm John," and he's like, "I'm Paul," and so that's just awesome right there. Like, this is the next best thing to like time traveling and going back in time to see this important clash of the Titans. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't do that. So making a movie this accurate is like the next best thing. And so he sees him, and he asks him, like, "You want a beer?" And he's like, "I'll take a tea." And and you can just see this cat is different. You know what I'm saying? He's cut from a different cloth. He's on some other shit. He's like on some Andre 3000 flute shit. You know what I'm saying? And the guys, they all scoff at the tea. They're like, "Tea? Like, you want tea?" John's all like, "Did you watch us play?" And he's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, what'd you think?" He's like, "Yeah, you're all right." And they're like, "They're all right, all right." He thinks we're all right. They're all like kind of laughing at him. And John's like, "Oh, so can you play that thing on your back, or are you just holding it?" And he's like, "Yeah, I play a little." So, and then he starts playing Eddie Cochran 20 Flight Rock, this is all true, like I said. And John like susses him out, and he's like looking around, and they're all like looking at each other. They're like, "Oh shit, this guy's good," And the other guys are looking at him like, "What the fuck? Like, this guy's pretty good." So yeah, so it's like an impromptu audition. And so John's like, "How old are you?" He's like, 15 last month. And he's like, "Oh, I can do Little Richard too." And then John's like, "Ta ta." He's like, "Nice meeting you." He smugly walks away. And the other guy in the band, he says something smart. He's like, "Oh, I'd rather have him in our band than in anyone else's." It's like a strategy move, you know what I'm saying? Like, all of a sudden, this kid is fucking Brian Cashman. He's the GM of the Yankees, trying to make chess moves. And John looks back at Paul and is like, "Okay, I think we need this guy." So yeah, I like that actor kid, the guy who plays Paul McCartney. He was the little kid from Love Actually, actually. So, and he's done other stuff, but I mean, I think this is his peak for me, kind of playing Paul.
Mm.
And then we cut to there's a ring at the door, and his auntie opens the door, and Paul's there, and he's like, "Oh, John, your little friend is here." It's just funny how she says it. It's like, dude, it's Paul fucking McCartney. um, so they're upstairs, and they're like swapping chords. Well, mainly it's Paul teaching John the chords. You know what I'm saying? Because there was no internet at the time. You know what I'm saying? Like, you got chords by word of mouth. You had to like ask people how do you play this. You know what I'm saying? Or you were just musically gifted and you could figure it out yourself, like you're fucking Mozart or something. Like, so that he was showing him the chords, and then he starts playing Blue Moon. It's a nice little rendition. It's pretty cool. And then his aunt like kicks him outside because she doesn't like the noise. So she's like, "Get the hell out of here!" And so they're on the porch, and John asks Paul, "Is like, oh, so does your mom like hearing little baby play rock and roll?" And Paul's like, "Oh yeah, she would have loved it." And then he's like, "Bollocks." And he's like, "No, like, she's not around anymore. She sort of died last year." And John's like, "Whoa." Like, but it's just funny how he says that. Just the awkward Britishness of him saying that. And so Paul's like, "Oh, like, if we're gonna take this seriously, we should start writing our own stuff so we don't get stiffed by record companies." And which is funny because they wrote their own stuff and they still got stiffed by record companies. You know what I'm saying? So doesn't matter. Even though they wrote their own shit. So John said, yeah, exactly. So John says, oh, I write, poems and stories, and Paul tells him, hey, add a tune and it's a song, and he's like, what about you? And Paul's like, yeah, I've written a couple, and John's like, how do you know so much? Like, you don't seem like a rock and roll guy. And Paul's like, why? Because I don't go around smashing things and acting like a dick? And he's like, yeah, like basically. That's like the rock and roll standard uh, way of acting. And so we see a little montage of John writing, and like I said, the doodles. That's exactly how he would do shit. And then his aunt gets his report card, and it's crap, and she's pissed. So um, John goes home, and he's about to pick up his guitar, and he can't find it. He's like, "What the fuck?" And he looks around, he can't find it. He goes up to her, and it's like, "Where's my fucking guitar?" She's pissed off. She's like, "Your grades fucking suck. Like, you made a promise that you would get your act together." He's like, "It's my group," and she tells him like, "Oh, grow up, John." And he's like, "Fuck off!" And she's like, "What'd you say?" And he's like, "I said fuck off." He runs out. Like, that was great. I'm glad I'm glad that he wasn't, he didn't call back in that sense. Like, I almost felt like he was gonna be like, "I said fuck off." Did I stutter, bud? Felt like he was gonna pull a Judd Nelson on her ass. So then he runs off and he plays a show anyways. He's playing a show with Paul, and he comes back home and he kind of, tells his aunt, he's like, "Oh, like my mom got me this guitar." He kind of shows off to her, and she's like pissed off a little bit. And then they do they do another show, and they have their teddy boy suits that they have on. They have these white teddy boy suits with the black little tie. They look like five fucking Colonel Sanderses on stage. You know what I'm saying? Felt like I was gonna get a original recipe chicken.
With every concert, bucket there, bucket there.
Yeah, free bucket, free bucket in the lobby. Anyways, yeah. So yeah, they do that show, and you know, we see John introduces Paul, and he kind of disses him. And Paul sarcastically says, "Oh, thanks for the kind words." And John says, "I didn't mean them." Like, he's kind of being a dick there already. And Paul starts playing, and he's like shredding on acoustic guitar. He's shredding it. And John's mom is there. She's like cheering them on, and John looks jealous of Paul. Like he plays better, and his mom is cheering him on too. Like she cheered for Elvis. He's like, you could see the anger in his eyes. And then we see another dude in the crowd watching. And we cut to they're on the double decker bus, and Paul says, "Hey, this is my mate George. He should be in the band." And John is like, "He should be in bed." Like, he thinks he's too young, but George, he always had a good sense of humor. So he just lets his fingers do the talking, and he starts playing Raunchy. The song is called Raunchy. He starts playing that, and John sees this, and I love the look that he gives Paul. He looks over, he's like, "Oh shit!" He's like, "This guy's good too." Whatever. Then we cut to, and then they're doing another show, and George is in the band now. And they're wearing these black suits, and it's pretty cool. And chicks are cheering. His mom is cheering. Marie is there, and she could see that like John's like checking out some other chick, and she's like pissed about that. She's like, "What the fuck?" Even though they were never officially dating, I guess she got jealous that he's trying to hook up with other chicks now. But hey, you got to give it up. You know what I'm saying? This guy, rock stars need groupies. You know what I'm saying? Um, but I like Angel Face more. I think she's better than the other girl. Um, but after the show, his mom's happy. She's like really ecstatic, and she's like, "We should celebrate. Let's have a party this weekend." And John is like hard drinking already. He's like, he's got the wife beater on. He looks like Eminem with a pompadour. He's And his friend's like, "What about the birds, Miss Lennon?" You know, and she's like, "Just keep them in their cages." And she like pokes his nose, and John's like getting pissed when he sees that, and then I guess he hooks up with the blonde chick in the bathroom, and that's the first of many groupies. As I told you before, Chris, you
Yes.
you had your doubts, but
You
I
shattered
told
my
you.
ideal of John being a pure, innocent rock star man. Clean cut boy.
Yeah, no, he was a wild one, as
Just
they
into the
said.
ladies.
Yep, he had his way. And so his blonde friend, they're walking, in the field, and the blonde kid tells him he has to quit the band. He has to like either join the military or be a cop or something like that. And John's like, "Oh, okay." And then that kid says something weird. He's like, sometimes I wish I had tits. Not in a weird way, just to play with him a bit. It's just like, okay.
Nice to know.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I like
In
I
the
like that they
military.
threw that into the script. So we cut to the party, and I like John's teddy boy blazer that he has on. He has the classic teddy boy. Um, and then John sees Paul playing "Love Me Tender" for John's mom, and it's like a sweet little moment, and he finishes it, and his mom's like, "That was for your mom, taken away from you. It's not fair." That's what she says, and John's like, "She had cancer. What's your excuse?" So yeah, like John's being a dick. He's got some alcohol in him, and then his mom brings out the cake, and John blows out the candles, and they're like, "A few words, Johnny boy," and he's like, "Cock, balls, fuck," and she's like covering her daughter's ears when he says that. Yeah, John is straight roasting these guys. Yeah, I thought Tom Brady was gonna come around there for a sec,
He's a
and then
mean drunk. He's a mean drunk, let me tell
yeah, yeah, he's not a happy drunk, dick drunk.
you. More so than usual.
And he breaks the washboard on the blonde kid's head. you know, I don't think it hurt, but it was just him being an a hole. And so he goes outside with his mom, and he wants to know where his dad is. He kind of confronts her about why she abandoned him. He let this stuff bubble up to now. He's pissed off, and she tells him that he might be in New Zealand or something. He was in the merchant navy. Uh, yeah, and his mom makes excuses that his aunt, her sister, wouldn't give him back to her, and John's like, she's like, "I'm not hers to give, like I'm yours." So he's pissed, and he just walks away, and he goes back home to his aunt, and he starts arguing with her, saying, "Oh, you wouldn't give me back to my mom," and then his aunt gets pissed, and she takes his ass back to her house, and she tells her, like, she's like, "Okay, what really happened," or whatever. So, and she says, "Oh, like your mom has always needed company, if you know what I mean by that.
You're
And
just
he's like, "Yeah, exactly." And he's like, "Rock and roll, hey mom, rock and roll," like rock and roll lifestyle. Um, and so the aunt says that she had a daughter with a soldier, I guess, while his dad was away, and
fighting in
you
the
know,
army or something like that. Fighting in war.
yeah, I guess, and yeah, World War
Yeah.
II.
Made a baby with another guy.
Yeah, with another soldier. Yeah, and she said that then she met the dude she's with now, the David Morrissey guy, and so I guess yeah, we see like a little flashback of like his mom and dad arguing, and his dad has the great idea of asking the 5-year-old kid. He's like, "Who do you want to go with, me?" And he's like, "Daddy." So he goes with her, or goes with him, but then I don't know, the whole thing is fucked up, but but he gives this like Brando-esque performance. He's crying, he's pissed, he's it's like it's both your faults, and he runs out and he gives a pretty good performance, honestly.
Been holding
He
that
goes,
in for a long time. He had to let
yeah,
go,
he had to unleash it, yeah.
unleash the
Um,
beast.
yeah, so he goes for a walk and he sees a club with some teddy boys and he tries to walk in and the bouncer is like, no chance or whatever. Just the irony of that, you know what I'm saying? Because like a few years later, he can get into any club, you know what I'm saying? And not only that, he's usually the one being paid by the club to play, you know? So then he sees Marie, and like Marie's with her friend, and he's like, "Forgive me, angel face," and he's like about to kiss her, and her friend just grabs her and is like, "Oh, like forget him, he's a loser," or whatever, which is funny because he ended up doing a song, "I'm a Loser," which is on I think Beatles for Sale. Like yeah, he was really trying to. It was really a dark song where he was saying like, "I'm a loser," like I'm an asshole. You know what I'm saying? That's what he was really trying to say. But people listened to it like, "Oh, it's such a great song, I'm so happy." You know what I'm saying? Like people listen to it like Third Eye Blind. You know, fucking uh, Semi Charmed Life. You know what I'm saying? Like people hear the beat and they're like, "Oh, what a great song!" When the song's about like heroin and suicide. You know what I'm saying? Same with your boy Blunt, right?
Hmm.
You're Beautiful is about some guy on crystal meth gonna commit suicide. You know what I'm saying? So, uh, yeah,
Save it.
exactly.
Oh,
Believe it or not, the blunt likes to smoke the blunt, the laced blunt. um. So yeah, and so I guess he like sleeps on the pier. Like we see him waking up, and he's like on the pier, which I've been to, by the way. It's awesome.
very
Um,
cool.
yeah, and he goes back home the next morning, and he's like, okay, like sorry, aunt. Like he has to like swallow his pride, and he sees his aunt putting flowers for her husband at the cemetery, and he's like, there's no point hating someone you love. That's what he tells her, and he kind of tries to move on from that, um, and then like he tells her that he should move out. He's like, oh, it feels crowded all of a sudden,
Hmm.
and maybe without him in the way, she and his mom could remember that they used to be sisters. So, and she doesn't argue with him. She doesn't say anything. He just walks away. I think she's like, oh, like maybe I can rent his room too now. She's like looking at the money side. you know. Um, so his aunt meets his mom at a cafe, and I don't know if any of this part is true, but this like reconciliation, I don't know if that's necessarily true. It could be. I never really stumbled upon it in my research, but and then we see him with the black coat and the glasses, and he's smoking, and like that's how you see him in a lot of his pictures. He looks like a beatnik. And then he sees his mom and aunt sunbathing in the yard, and the tenant guy is there too, just hanging out. He's like trimming the bushes. Um, he's also working on the lawn. He he walks up to them, and it feels happier. It's like a nice little sunny day. I guess he's in college now, but it's not necessarily a university. Like they just call anything a college. Like I guess it's like a boarding school, but not really. It's like a high school that has dorms. I guess that's what they call a college, basically. Um, so he's off at like this art college or whatever, but he's like, like he's like 17 or 18 at the time. Um, and his mom tells him to sit down for a bit, and so he does. And it's a nice little moment with the three of them basking in the sun, literally, and we can hear him on the soundtrack playing "Little Girl," which I guess he wrote that, and we see Paul like listening to him play it, and Paul seems impressed by the song, and then we see his mom kiss his aunt, and It's a nice little moment. And as she walks home, she gets hit by a car, and we see her on the ground, and so that's true. So what really happened was she was hit by an off-duty cop who was drunk driving.
Mm.
That's how she died.
Pigs.
Um, yeah, and and drunk driving is still a problem. You know what I'm saying? This movie is a period piece. This is in the fucking 50s. You know what I'm saying? This isn't modern day, but drunk driving is still a thing now. I've heard about a few just recently. You know, people don't learn. Um, so they're at the funeral, and he's quiet. She's smoking. His aunt. And then John hears some guitar playing, and he's pissed off, so he goes to that room and he takes the guitar from Paul, and he's like, "What is this, fucking group practice or whatever?" And the blonde kid is like, "John, it's your mom's," or whatever. And then he headbutts that blonde kid in the nose, and that kid starts bleeding. And dude, this blonde kid gets his ass beat in this movie. No wonder he wants tits. He wants some fun. Yeah, he gets put through the ringer in this. So, and then John runs out, and Paul goes after him, and he's like, "You want to hit someone? You can hit me too." And then John just punches him in the face, and
Knocks
he
him out.
falls.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that was awesome. Love
yeah.
that part.
You like the part where John punches Paul, right?
Factual, or did they throw that in?
No, I think that's for real. Yeah. They would have skirmishes, kind of. They're brothers. I know you don't have a brother, but if you did, you would see that it's a real love hate thing. You know what I'm saying? Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, he punches out Paul, and then he immediately regrets it, though. You know what I'm saying? He's like, "Shit," and he's like, "I'm sorry," and he like lifts him up, and they hug, and he just starts bawling. He starts crying while they're hugging, and he's like, "She's never coming back," and Paul's like, "No, she's not," and they have a real bro moment. And so like that's really what they bonded over, is that they both lost their moms like at a relatively young age. You know what I'm saying? So that's, other than being able to play music so well and songwriting and all that stuff, and being from the same town, they have a lot in common. They also have that in common: the loss of their mothers, young. And so they come back in to the funeral parlor, and they're side hugging as they walk in, and he tells that blonde kid, he's like, "I'm a dick. I'm sorry, son." And he kind of like, you know, coddles him a bit. But yeah, it's funny how he says that. Like, they say son, but not like in a hip hop way, not in like a Wu Tang Clan way. Like, "Yo, what up, son? Where's the bone, son?" Like they say it like in a British way, which is like kind of where we will say it. Like, we'll be at work and we might fuck up and we'll be like, "Oh, sorry, son." Like we'll say it like that. Yeah, and so all these dudes are crying. They're all fucking bawling. And John's like, "No, everybody stop crying. We're supposed to be a fucking rock and robot." And they all start laughing after that. Um, and then the stepdad comes in, and then it's like when you see him, you're like, "Oh shit, yeah, he was married to this lady." You know what I'm saying? So it's like he must be sad, and he's like, "She was saving this for you," and it's like a little envelope. He's like, "There's a few bob in there," like meaning there's a bit of money in there, and when he says that, John kind of smiles a little bit, and cut to they're walking to this recording studio. So this is all true. So they use this money to go to the recording studio, and John decides to like put his real emotion into the song. So they record the song in spite of all the danger, which is a Paul original. Paul wrote that song. And I love how passionately he sings the song. We see him like jiving to the beat, and he kind of reminds me of Eddie Murphy in the "Party All the Time" video. Like, I was almost expecting Rick James to come out of nowhere and start playing guitar. Um, Speaking of which, like well before Rick James blew up in the early '80s, with like "Give It to Me, Baby," Mary Jane. So he was in the group in the late '60s in Canada with Neil Young. So they were both draft dodging, and they're like wound up in Canada. They're like, "Oh shit, you play guitar?" He's like, "Okay, yeah, I play guitar." Like, let's do a band. So they were in a band for a brief time called the Mina Birds, and they put out like a single. They put out like a single with two songs on it, and they never did an album, but it was just cool that these guys were in the same band, and it was so surprising, you know. And I remember like on the VH1 Behind the Music of Rick James, and he was like, "Yeah, I was in a band with Neil Young," and he's like, music knows no color. He was like saying, he's like, "Music is music, man." Yeah, look it up, Google it. So yeah, but this song is great. This, in spite of all the danger, it's like a pretty complex song for like a 15-year-old to write. Like it's very Buddy Holly ish, and we see them all like harmonizing on the mic. You know, so this song it's on the anthology part one. You can peep it on there, and it's nice editing. Like while he's singing, they show him like dancing with his mom. You know, it's a nice little juxtaposition. And then after that, he tells his aunt, he's like, "We're going to Hamburg, play a few shows." So he needs her to sign off on this form to get his passport. And she's like, "Where do I sign?" And he says, "Where it says parent or guardian." And she's like, "Which am I?" And he's like, "Both." And she hugs him, and it's a nice, touching, cathartic moment. You know, she's been chewing his ass out for 90% of the movie.
Finally got
Nice
that
clip.
hug that he needed so badly. He finally
Yeah, yeah. Finally got that hug. Exactly.
got it. Sorry.
Yeah, from the beginning, he wouldn't hug her when her husband died, but she hugged him when she found out he's going to Germany. So, yeah, she's like, finally, his ass is out of here.
Hooligan's gone.
Yeah,
I can rent 3 rooms.
it's all about the Benjamins, Chris. Benjamins. So anyway, it's all about the Benjamin Disraelis, being British and all, you know. And so she tells him to put on his glasses. You know, she tells him that a few times. And he tells her he'll call her when he gets to Hamburg. And it's funny because he walks out and he like takes the shit off. He's like, "I'm taking the shit off." He takes off the glasses. And then we hear the song "Mother" play on the soundtrack, which so that's from his solo career, post Beatles. And we hear that as he walks away, and then like some text pops up, and it says, John did call her when he got there to Hamburg, and every day for the rest of his life.
Yeah, every
Which,
week. Every week, I'd
oh,
say.
every week, yeah.
That's crazy. Big rock star, women, drugs,
I'm
gas.
sure he missed a week or two, you know, but
Well, yeah.
they they should have
90,
put that
yeah.
they should have put that Beatles like dramatization may not have happened. Yeah, no, I'm sure he. I mean, you could, and then like that's the thing. You see the real pictures of them after that. You know what I'm saying? And you see him with her, and you see him older. You know, in the Beatles with posing with her. Yeah, I'm sure he stayed close with her over time. You know, and the real pictures thing. That's almost like a cliche at this point in biopics. Like you saw it in Bohemian Rhapsody. You know, the real pictures. You know, like they always do that now.
That was
You
nice.
know, which usually I don't love biopics. You know, I feel like often they're not that great or kind of boring or not accurate. You know what I'm saying? But I felt like this movie came out good. I felt like Bohemian Rhapsody came out pretty good. I really like that movie. Actually, I really like Bohemian Rhapsody. So yeah, these ones did it right. Also, Control, the movie about Ian Curtis from Joy Division, that came out. That movie's really good too. My wife loves that movie. Um, so yeah, like this song, Mother, like his solo songs were more personal. You know what I'm saying? As compared to his Beatles songs, like, and I know Noel Gallagher doesn't like that about his solo work, like, because he's like, oh, when he was solo, his songs were more personal. It's like when he was in the Beatles, like, what was he singing about? Obla di obla da, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, but you have to, he was younger at the time too. He was younger when he was in the Beatles. As you grow older, you're supposed to mature a bit, so I think that was his evolution. And then I like how the song kind of breaks down, because it was like an outtake, and then the credits hit, and And then you see this dedication to Anthony Minghella, who was a director, and he passed, I guess, shortly before this came out. And so he directed The English Patient and other films, but he did English Patient with Kristen Scott Thomas, who was in this. And so his son is Max Minghella, who's a really good actor. So he was in Babylon, which I love that movie. He was in Social Network, which I love that movie. And he was in The Internship with Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn, which I love that movie. He's fucking hilarious in that.
That's a
We should talk
different,
about that sometime.
wide variety of films.
He's hella funny in that. He's really funny. And so yeah, I remember seeing the Beatles Love, the Cirque du Soleil show. You never saw that, right? Or you did?
Oh yeah, it was awesome. It was
Oh,
amazing.
you did see it. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I saw it twice. So I saw like both versions of it because there was like the original version, and then there was like they kind of redid it and changed it a little bit. But I probably like the original version a bit more. Like I feel like it had more direct Beatles allusions to it. You know what I'm saying? Like I could point the subtle things that they put on the Beatles. You know, the average person wouldn't know, but I could pick it out, and I love that. I
Mm.
love seeing that. I feel like I didn't see that much of it when in the second version of it. But there's like a piece near the end of the show where we kind of see this lady. She's kind of dancing and doing acrobatics, and we see she has like a red dress on, and there's like some vehicle that kind of like kills her or whatever, and so that's like an allusion to
Mm.
John's mom. But I mean, the average person watching it doesn't know what that is. You know what I'm saying? But me being a fan, like I can pick all that shit out. You know, so the fact that they threw stuff in like that, I really love that.
Mm.
Um, so it's too bad that they closed down that show, and I guess the Mirage is going to be something else or whatever because it was a really good show. But that just shows you the generation that we live in don't have respect for the Beatles. You know what I'm saying? So, I think so. Taylor Johnson, Aaron Taylor Johnson, he killed it in this. I thought he did a kick-ass job playing John. You know, and I think that's why he's gotten these good roles so far in his career. And he's still pretty young. He's only 34. Speaking of Kick-Ass, I loved Kick-Ass. He was in Kick-Ass. He was in Nocturnal Animals, which I really liked. And he was in Savages, the Oliver Stone movie. Fucking love that movie. It's really good. I plan on talking about that sometime. And it's weird because even though he has blue eyes and John has brown eyes, like he's still like like he still kind of looks like him. And I guess they felt that that would be weird changing his eye color. Like he looked too weird with the brown eyes, so they just kept him blue, and he somehow pulled it off. Um, but I thought he did a great job on this,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, and I know in an interview he was saying like he was trying not to be John Lennon, like he was just playing it like he was playing a normal teenager. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's why he did such a good job with it, is that he didn't put like all this importance on it. Like, oh, I'm playing John Lennon. I got to really, you know, be John Lennon. You know what I'm saying? He just played it straight and it
Mm-hmm.
came out great. Like, I think that's why he did such a good job with it. And I don't know if you knew the backstory on this. Yeah, like, so this Sam Taylor Wood, who's the director. So she was born 67, 1967. It's a couple years before you.
Give or take.
Yeah. So Aaron Taylor Johnson, he hooked up with her on the set of this. You know, and he's younger than me. He was born in 1990, this guy.
Wow.
So he was like 18, 17 maybe when he hooked up with her, and she was like 41, 42. So he smashed it on the set. and and they
Physically.
had a kid. Like he got her pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah. So I remember when he was doing an interview for Kick Ass, they were like, "Oh, well, you're gonna have a kid soon." And he was like, "Yeah." I was like, "He's gonna have a kid? What the fuck?" He's like 18 or whatever. But then, and then I found this whole thing. I was like, "Oh shit, wow, like that's crazy." I mean, he's still with her, and I think they have a few more kids, but that's just crazy, bro.
Yeah, that's insane. So they've been married or something for like 12 years?
Yeah, yeah. Ever since then, yeah. But he hit it, but
He,
did not quit it.
nicely
he
done.
stayed with it. So
Later.
yeah, I mean, and you know, I remember seeing this in the theater, and And I remember walking out of the theater, and you like, when you walk out of a movie theater after like a good ass movie, you know what I'm saying? You're like on a high, and it's like for one brief moment you can see like in this fucked up world there are some artisans who can produce something beautiful for us to enjoy. You know what I'm saying? Like that's why they do it, and that's why we do this podcast. Celebrate the beauty and humor of film, the seventh art, Briterion Bollection, biatches. Um, anything else you want to say about this, Chris?
No, it was really well done. Yeah, I had the same kind of feeling. Like you said, just being there, it was like you were there watching every important moment, and there were so many things could have gone completely different, but it was just like fate for all of them to end up together, for him to be with his mom for that time so she could teach him the banjo, and she kind of like fired up his passion, and like all this shit had to happen in order for the Beatles to, I don't know, evolve, form.
Yeah,
It's kind of cool to like be there, and it had a lot of great moments in it. A lot of emotional moments. But to see that these two women, they were like completely opposites, but one really fueled his passion, his music, and gave him all this energy. I don't just- his passion for women, maybe. I don't know. The other was kind of a school marm, but very disciplinary and like strict. But she provided the home and all the things he needed to live in life. So like without those two women, and then all this shit happening.
yeah,
I'm using technical terms here. Sorry about that.
yeah. That's fine.
But yeah, it was great to see that how that all happened, and it's good to hear that it's not a bunch of bullshit that they just put together or slapped together to make it look really beautiful. It was actually something that happened organically, beautifully, and according to you, very factually. So I like that they didn't try to add extra things in there, and you know they don't need to. It's a great story. It's a great his history is very interesting. I didn't know a lot of that shit. Didn't know about his mom, so that was crazy.
That was eye opening, as you
Yes,
would say.
yes. Came from
Um,
very humble beginnings, but became one of the most famous people next to Jesus, probably.
yeah, and the only one you don't get to see is Ringo because
Yeah,
he came later. And a lot of people like to talk shit about Ringo, like he didn't contribute that much to the group. But to me, he's just as important as the other guys. To me, he's the best drummer. He's the best drummer all time. Like, not in a technical sense. There are better drummers who can drum faster, harder. Do better solos and shit like that. But it's like I don't care about that. Like, if I'm trying to write good pop rock songs, I want Ringo Starr as the drummer. Like, if I'm trying to write Beatles songs, I need Ringo Starr as the drummer. Otherwise, they're not going to be good. You know. And he's said it before. He's like, yeah, people like to talk shit about me. He's like, but they were a band before I joined, and like everything they put out was a flop. Until I joined the band, then they started making hits. You know what I'm saying? So Ringo's very important. I love Ringo. Peace and love, Ringo, as he always does.
yeah.
Um,
You ever seen
and
him?
then
You ever seen him tour?
no, I mean I
Really?
want to. I mean I would love to see him sometime. I got to see Paul at Desert Days. That was great. I guess I would like to see Paul again, but that was such a great show. It's like I don't mind keeping that intact. Like Desert Days was awesome. It had the Stones, Dylan,
Mm.
Roger Waters, The Who, Neil Young. Speaking of Neil Young, Rick James. No, Rick James wasn't there. He had already passed by then, sadly. But yeah, that would have been cool. Yeah, but I know that Sam Mendes. I don't know if you heard about this. Sam Mendes, who did American Beauty, which I love that movie. He's doing a project where he's doing like four separate movies or like short films, but like an hour at least. That's gonna tackle each Beatle during the Beatles, run. So we're gonna see like through each of their perspectives. So we'll get Ringo's perspective, we'll get John's, Paul's, George's, and everyone's kind of like, how's this gonna come out? Like, like everyone's like on the edge of their seat, like, what the fuck? How's this gonna look like? So I think I'm at least waiting with bated breath to see how this shit comes out. I'm sure other Beatles fans are. They're like kind of nervous as to how this will turn out, but we'll see. In the meantime, if you haven't seen Nowhere Boy, you should really watch it. I think it's a great film, very underrated film
Mm-hmm.
about the man, the myth, the legend, Lennon, John Lennon. Thank you, Chris, for joining with me.
Thank you.
Pleasure as always.
Likewise.
Thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe our shit. We need the support. Help a brother out. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. Peace. Peace and love. Out. Bye.